Hey, it's Chris and Classy Thomas back for another episode of CW Movie Night. How you doing tonight, Thomas?
I am doing fantastic. How about you, Chris?
Not bad, not bad. I'm excited about our topic tonight. I'm a big fan of this franchise, and this was one of your picks. And if I
Yes.
were, I'm interested to hear some of your rationale because if I was going to pick one movie from this franchise, this would probably not be it. But
Really?
it's got a long and storied history, and I can't wait to dig into it a little bit. So, what are we talking about tonight, Thomas?
Well, we're going to be talking about the 2023 movie Evil Dead Rise, which is the fifth movie of this franchise. This franchise is made up of about four films and one television series prior to Evil Dead Rise.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so like I was saying, like that's got a long history, and like I just want to reiterate here, like I'm no slouch when it comes to this franchise, like I was the cliched Sam Raimi, like Bruce Campbell fanboy, and when I was in high school, and here's just a quick look at some of my personal collection here. This is Bruce Campbell was doing a book signing in Toronto when I was in high school, and I was like, me and my buddy Tim got on the dang bus and went down to the big city and waited in line to get Bruce Campbell to sign his copy of Make Love the Bruce Campbell Way, which is a fictional fictional novel about his own life, which is just the most bizarre thing ever. And I also got him to sign a VHS of the first movie because that was a cool thing to do in 2005 or six, whatever it was.
hmm
But yeah, man, it's got a long and storied history, as you were saying. So tell us a little bit more about the franchise.
Yeah, well, it started out in 1981 with the Evil Dead, and what was really funny about the Evil Dead when I first saw it. Now, I'm a all right, I'm a child of the '60s. That's when I was born.
Yep.
So around 1981, I probably was about maybe 16, 17 years old, and the Evil Dead came out. I was not allowed to see it at that time, but I remember when I did wind up seeing it. Hey, King Dingling, that I actually I thought it was more like a horror comedy because
Right.
Bruce Campbell has that way of acting that just kind of has that humor infused in it. So I wound up not really being scared by the movie. Same thing with Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness, because Evil Dead 2 was like I'll call it a soft reboot. It wasn't really, they kept the storyline the same. They kept, they didn't bring back any of the same characters except for Bruce Campbell, but
Right.
they kind of essentially followed a majority of the same storyline. They made a few changes, and then it went down and flowed into the Army of Darkness. And now, an interesting little fact that I heard about Army of Darkness. I actually had seen this on one of our podcast on a different podcast, which I'll kind of give some credits to later, where he said that the Army of Darkness that they originally wanted to call it the Medieval Dead, but
Pretty good.
the studio didn't like it, so they wound up with Army of Darkness. And I'm like, would that have not been the most epic name, Medieval Dead? So
Yeah.
I don't know what the studio was thinking, but they need to leave it in the hands of the creatives.
Yeah.
Now, in
I just don't think they believed in the brand cachet of the franchise, Like they were just thinking what's a good standalone title, whereas the Medieval Dead requires you to know the Evil Dead to get the joke.
yeah,
Yeah, they wanted to generalize it.
exactly. And it was and now the Army of Darkness was actually that was probably to me the funniest and most slapstick of all the Evil Dead movies, and that's the
Yeah.
reason why I always took it as a horror comedy. Well, that was until 2013
Well,
when they redid the Evil Dead.
yeah, well, I gotta say, on Army of Darkness started my obsession with this franchise just because, like, I was probably in 10th grade or something. I found this stuff late, right? Like, I'd never heard of it before.
hmm
I caught Army of Darkness from the beginning on on cable somewhere, and I'm just like, my God, I've never seen anything like this. This is the greatest film I've ever seen in my whole life. It's amazing. And then I managed to track down Evil Dead 2, and it took me a long into it was before streaming. It was hard to find, man. It took me a long time, like a year, to track down a copy of Evil Dead 1 because I had to like
Mhm.
go to a video store that had it for sale. And like, so I watched them in reverse order, but so it really made very little sense to me. But before we get into the remake, I just wanted to ask you, like, on the topic of the trilogy,
Mhm.
I was listening to one of the, it might have been the Army of Darkness DVD commentary. It just burned into my mind where like Sam Raimi says something like, if you're really paying attention for between the first three movies, there's a point where you could cut them where they would flow as a continuously uninterrupted story. And did that ever occur to you? Have you ever heard about that?
No, I hadn't heard about that. No.
Well, I don't know if you remember the ending of Evil Dead 1. The camera like flies right into Bruce Campbell's mouth, basically, and
Yes.
that's the end of the movie. Well, after the sort of quasi recap in the second movie, where it introduces like a simplified version of the first film, that same camera move occurs, and apparently that's the end of the recap, so to speak. And that's when Bruce Campbell gets blown through the air against a tree, basically. So you could almost start Evil Dead 2 there, and skip the reimagined Linda and all that stuff. But
Mhm.
and then I guess you cut the alternate version of Medieval Times from the end of Evil Dead 2. But yeah, apparently there's a way you could watch it where it sort of flows without the recaps in a pretty reasonable way.
Yeah. But yeah, that's. I mean, that. Yeah, I can kind of see that. Now, I would have a difficult time seeing them blending Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2 since they are essentially the same story. But
Well, 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 that's the thing, right? Because it's new characters after that scene where he gets like blown against the tree and turned into Evil Ash. So like it's Nobi's daughter and like the hillbilly
mhm.
guy, I forget his name. You know what I mean? So like it
Yeah,
does,
exactly.
yeah. So new people arrive at the cabin after that point.
Oh, okay,
So like
I see what you're
it does
saying.
kind of work. Yeah.
Okay, I got you now. That makes sense. As soon as you said that, okay, I see.
Yeah, so what's up with this 2013 remake? Was that any good in your
Well,
estimation?
all right. I I felt like that was when they actually turned it into a true horror movie. It was the bloodiest and the most gory of all of the franchises. And I kind of had a little bit of a problem with it initially because I said, well, you're taking all the fun out of Evil Dead because Evil Dead to me used to be fun. And well, I think what it is that Bruce Campbell is fun.
Yeah.
And so I was like, man, I said, this is too serious now. It's too weird. It's too creepy. But it does have its own merits. And we'll kind of talk about that a little bit into the commentary when we're talking about the movie. But I didn't think it was a horrible movie. I did think that the characters were not well written though. The characters kind of seemed a little flat to me, and I would have liked them to have had a little more personality. But the effects were amazing, and it was kind of cool where they kind of flipped the script just a little bit, and instead of having Ash, the male character, be the thing, they kind of switched it again to being the final girl. Whereas Ash really was the final girl in all the other movies. He was
Yeah,
really
you could
the
say.
final boy, yeah. So but yeah, it was an okay movie. Um,
So
I
casual.
have yeah,
I do, man.
I have more respect for it now, seeing it in context of all the other parts of the franchise, which now takes us to Ash versus the Evil Dead, which is the TV show, which of course was on Stars for 3 seasons. That was a fun show.
Yeah.
You got a chance to see real Deadites. You got a chance to see Bruce Campbell in his full glory, and where he kind of came into that show, um, kind of being a little bit of a washed up has been type of guy, still trying to fight to eat the
Yeah.
Deadites, and that was kind of cool to see them kind of take that character in that direction.
I agree. It was kind of the thing that we, you know, it was, I mean, we're assuming a lot that that some of the people watching have at least heard of this franchise and know the gist of it. But
Hmm.
it's really like the first three movies are really just all about Bruce Campbell as Ash Williams, uh, wrecking shop and killing deadites with chainsaws and shotguns. But except, I mean, the first movie he gets beat up for an hour, and then he starts killing them. But yeah. So, but this Ash versus the Evil Dead was like that was like what we always wanted for like 20 years and never thought we were gonna get. Like,
Mm.
if you like that franchise, you're like, oh man, wouldn't it be great if they made a sequel to Army of Darkness where like it's from the director's cut ending where he ends up in a post-apocalyptic future. No, no, people wanted all kinds of nonsense, right? But yeah, we didn't get that much except for a couple things I wanted to talk about here. Um, you know, there was some really cool Evil Dead video games, and
Mm.
specifically for me, these second two here were really impactful. The first one here on Dreamcast. I did not have a Dreamcast like most of society, and that's why Sega stopped making consoles right around that time. But this next one, Fistful of Boomstick, is like it's almost the plot of Ash versus the Evil Dead,
Mm.
like 15 years earlier in video game form. Like, Ash is 10 years after Army of Darkness. He's still working at S-Mart, which is basically, fill in the blank crappy department store that he's like 40-50 years old still working there, and like nobody believes his crazy drunk stories about fighting and saving the world 2 or 3 times, whatever it is. And it's cool because it opens up the scope in a way the films never did, where like the deadites are unleashed upon a whole town, and it's like urban warfare against the deadites,
Mm.
and there's all kinds of fun weapon upgrades and stuff, and it's just joyous chainsaw action. And of course you have Bruce Campbell reprising his role through the voice. But this other one, Thomas, Evil Dead Regeneration, this is the real gem. I think you'll find the concept of this very interesting.
Okay.
Basically, it's like the plot of this is if Ash didn't get sent back in time at the end of Evil Dead 2, and the cops just showed up at the cabin, and they're like, this guy just killed all of his friends. Clearly, look at the mess in this place. And he
Mm.
gets put in like insane asylum, and the crazy doctor running the insane asylum unleashes the deadites while examining Ash's belongings, basically including
Uh,
the Necronomicon. And
mm.
it's a great time, and you have this diminutive co-star voiced by Ted Raimi, who is of course in most of the Evil Dead films, and Sam Raimi's brother. It's a really fun game with a lot of interesting gameplay dynamics with the two characters. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's like right up there with the movies, that game, in my opinion. And it was just right at the tail end of the original Xbox there.
Mm.
But yeah, let's get into our main movie here, Evil Dead Rise.
All right. Well, I'm gonna take it from here, and
Well,
anytime you want to jump in, Chris, you just feel free to, as a fan of the franchise.
yeah,
And
that sounds good. But one thing I want to talk about real quick before we break down the synopsis, I just want to talk about how the world received this movie right up front.
yes.
And I don't know if you maybe you weren't maybe you weren't paying attention to the chatter when this first came out. So let's why don't we have our good buddy John tell us a little bit about how the world received Evil Dead Rise.
Hey everyone, it's that time of the show where I give you the IMDb rating as well as the Rotten Tomato score for this week's movie, Evil Dead Rise. Now, with a runtime of an hour and 36 minutes, IMDb has given it 6.5 out of 10 with 139,000 ratings. Moving on over to Rotten Tomato meter 84% with 233 reviews, and the audience score with over 2,500 verified ratings, Evil Dead Rise received 76%. not too shabby at all. Kicking it back to you, Thomas, as well as Chris in the studio. Until the next episode. All the best, guys.
All right. Thank you, John, for that.
Yeah, so the world's not mad at Evil Dead Rise like they are at Star Wars: The Acolyte right now. So that's good.
Well, it's a good thing we're not reviewing that one this week.
yeah. That's not. It's not. It did not get bombed by the fans of the classical fans of the franchise on Rotten Tomatoes. That's good. So yeah, now that we got that covered, what's the deal with this movie, Thomas?
All right. Well, let me tell you. All right. So Evil Dead Rise, of course, was produced by Sam Raimi, Bruce Campbell, and Robert Tappert, and the writer-director was Lee Cronin. Now, I did a little research on Lee Cronin. I wasn't familiar with him, and it looks like, upon looking at his the work that he's done in the past, I didn't see a lot of work that I was familiar with. However, based on this movie alone, I think that the demand for him might start increasing because he has written some very complex characters which are actually quite believable in my eyes.
Yeah.
And so he kind of he really did a good job. So let's go ahead and start.
Yeah. Well,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
oh, no problem. On the subject of him, this is I think only his second feature film directing, which is
Yeah.
pretty impressive because first of all, it doesn't suck, but I heard a quote from him saying that he basically wrote this movie while like locked in his apartment during the pandemic, and it kind of shows if you know that fact. You know what I mean? You can, if you think about the
Yeah,
details,
it
that does
does.
make sense.
It feels very claustrophobic and very yeah, I get that. That makes sense. That makes
Yeah.
perfect sense. Well, all right, starting off the movie, we basically see this titular first demon perspective where you see this movement actually look like it's flying through the air throughout the forest. So it's moving around the forest. It starts going out over a lake towards a dock where there are two people out there. But instead of that being the first perspective demon cam, it was not. We were faked out. Basically, what it was is that it was a drone that was being flown by the first character we're going to introduce ourselves to, which
Right.
is Caleb.
Okay, so this real quick on this drone shot, as a aficionado of the franchise, talking behind the scenes, Sam Raimi was very proud of his Demon Cam in the original movies because this is a time before drones, before Steadicam,
Mhm.
and there's a scene in Evil Dead 2 where the Demon Cam is chasing somebody and it flies right over the top of the hood of the car, and Sam Raimi's like, "Yeah, man, we just got a real long wooden board and stuck the camera on that, and then two guys ran on either sides of it,
Yeah.
got over the car." Now this is just the insult of insults, a modern knucklehead with a drone doing a shot that those guys had to work really hard to do. I don't know. Something I don't like about it.
Yeah, and but what was clever about this is that it was a great fake out because now with drones and things like that, you can actually achieve those shots so much easier. And the only thing that probably should have been the giveaway was the fact that you didn't hear that weird deadite sounding
Yeah.
moaning in the background.
Yeah, but it's like like when you think of a movie that came out in 1987, to see a camera look like a guy's just walking with a camera,
Yes.
but then it flies over a car is like the audience's mind thought you shouldn't be able to do that with a camera. Wow, that's a cool effect. Now that is gone. No one thinks
Mhm.
that anymore. It's weird. It doesn't have the impact it did. But anyways,
that's
yeah.
true. So also on the dock with Caleb is the second character. Her name is Teresa, and it looks like they're basically just enjoying a weekend at the lake. Now, while Teresa's on the pier, she's reading Wuthering Heights, and she decides she wants to go to the cabin, which is a nice A-frame, and check on her cousin Jessica. All right, so she gets up and she starts walking along the pier towards the A-frame cabin that they rented for the weekend. Now, of course, this A-frame, as you can see it, is a bit of a step up from the typical cabins that we see in the Evil Dead franchise. Most of the time, they look like a bunch of shacks. Now,
Yeah.
but this
is like
A-frame
a-
looks pretty nice.
This is like a trendy like Instagram cabin, you know, like this is where the influencers go there to take pictures, but you know they made it look a little bit shabbier for the movie, I
Yeah,
think.
they kind of shabbed it up just a little. But all right, so now I got to ask you. Now I got to ask you a question. All right, and it might sound just slightly racist, but I'm going to ask
Oh
it
boy.
anyhow. Why do white people like going out to shabby shacks in the woods where there's nothing around you? There's no Wi Fi. Many times there's no electricity. Why do you want to go to a cabin
Oh
in the
man.
woods? Please explain it to me because I've never understood that. I gotta know.
All right. Well, I think this is not. I don't know if this is a racial thing. I think you might have been the right generation to be particularly traumatized by stuff like their first Friday the 13th and stuff like that. You know, like but you know, a cabin. I gotta say, a cabin seemed like a real boring thing to me until I was like about 30. When like,
Hmm.
you know, once you've worked that office job for a good clip. You know, something about turning off the phone and going fishing, and the fact that most likely deadites aren't real. There's something appealing about the cabin in that case.
Well, all right. So for me, when I think about roughing it for me is staying at a 4-star hotel instead of a 5-star. So now I consider that roughing it. So putting that in perspective, you're not
Okay.
gonna find me at the cabin in the woods with the insects and the mud and the dirt and the dust. I want to
Well,
be someplace nice.
that's most likely the worst stuff you're gonna experience there, rather than demons and such. But yeah, I hear you, man. I didn't like it for a long time either.
Yeah. Well, and see, I was a Boy Scout. I've actually gone camping. I've roughed it, living in a pup tent. Laying on the ground in my little sleeping bag. Been there and done
Never
that,
again,
buddy. Never again. Okay, I got back problems. I look. I have a massage chair on my porch. You think I'm gonna lay on the hard ground and
dude.
throw my
Last
back
time I
out?
Yeah, I get that. Last time I laid on a sleeping bag, like in a tent, like I was crippled for like 3 days. But anyways, yeah. Sorry.
Okay. So basically what happens is that Teresa goes back to the cabin. She finds Jessica still laying in bed. And so she takes a seat next to the bed and starts resuming her reading of Wuthering Heights. And while she's reading silently, all of a sudden, she hears her cousin begin to recite the exact passage she's reading. She then looks up and she's shocked because her cousin is sitting straight upright facing the window. And so Jessica is now continuing to recite the passages, but her voice begins to change into a more sinister sounding voice. And she didn't stop reading. Then all of a sudden, she just stops, collapses, and falls off the bed. So Teresa goes in to check on her, and she sees Jessica beginning to convulse. And Jessica then begins to vomit some kind of white, gooey. Bleh. So
Classic.
and then Jessica then collapses again. So Teresa goes to her side to check on her, and she leans her head towards Jessica's chest. She wants to see if she can hear a heartbeat. Now, as soon as she does that, big mistake, Jessica. When there's dead ice in the woods, don't get that close because Jessica's eyes fling open. She grabs a huge chunk of Teresa's hair and she pulls it so quickly and hard that she basically scalps her down
Yeah.
to the skull.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. And this is your classic like rated R horror film, right? We're not gonna traumatize the YouTube audience, and we don't want to get the channel in any trouble. And also, this movie's not, this sort of thing's not so much about the plot as it is the sequences, right? And we want you guys to still go see that.
Oh,
But
absolutely,
but it's
absolutely.
pretty wild. It's pretty wild sight
Yes,
when
it's a very wild scene.
yeah.
So then the scene changes and go back to Caleb, and he's still at the dock playing with his drone. And he turns around only to find Teresa stumbling towards him, and he sees that the she's missing part of her head. And then he sees Teresa. So then he sees Jessica following her, and she basically drops on the dock the hair and the skin that she just plucked from her head onto the dock. So Jessica grabs a drone which has been hovering over the dock and she pulls it to her face and begins to cut her face. And the force of that impact of the blades causes her to fall into the lake. So Caleb jumps in after her because he's trying to save her. That's his girlfriend actually. So he
Yeah.
jumps into the water, and he comes back up to grab some air. He can't find her, and then he finds himself being pulled back under the water. And then all of a sudden, you start seeing bubbles violently churning around the space where he once was. Now, Teresa's still sitting on the dock in horror about what's happening, and something comes flying out of the water onto the dock. And what do you think it is? Basically, it is Caleb's head, which has been snatched off of his body. So the next thing that we see is Jessica, and she begins to levitate out of the lake. And once she reaches a certain height, we see in the background behind the trees the title card of the movie rising up in red letters saying Evil Dead Rise. Now, I'll tell you what, this to me, as far as a cold opening and a title card, this was the most impressive title opening that I have ever seen.
Really? Okay.
Yes, I mean, seeing her rise up out of the lake, and as she's rising, behind her is rising the Evil Dead Rise right behind her.
Well, yeah, it's pretty
Oh
literal, I
man,
guess. But yeah, I don't know. What do you think about this whole like this was like a trend with like a lot of the horror remakes where it's like they have this whole uh it's almost I feel like it's almost like now how you see like when a movie trailer comes out, they know how dumb the audience is that they make like a 8-second version of the trailer that plays before you even watch the trailer. It's like here's some crazy stuff for 8 seconds, and now we're gonna play the real trailer. This is like you're here for a horror movie. Let's front load some kills because the main plot is going to take a while to get up to that point, and we
hmm
know that there's a bunch of uh, Gen Z's watching and whatnot. So I don't know. Is it good to have all these extra kills up at the top, or is this like? Is I guess it sort of fits with in line with Evil Dead 2, sort of.
well, it falls in line in the chronology of this particular movie, but the lead up to that title card to me was the thing. I think I needed to see some kills to basically show the impact of that title card. But just seeing that Evil Dead rise up behind her, I was like, oh man. I mean, the first thing that was literally probably what came out of my mouth. It might have been OS. I'm trying to keep it clean, y'all.
Hey, well,
But
that's pretty clean. All right.
but yeah, I was like, oh man, look at that. And it was just very impressive, and especially coming from this director who basically is pretty much a novice, but that was just a very impressive opening to me. All right, so now
Oh man.
moving forward, we get a thing that says one day earlier, and we're we're basically at a concert. We see a lady sitting on a toilet. She's taking a pregnancy test, and she looks at it with a look like, oh my gosh. And we come to find out later on who she is. But then we flash over, and we're in Los Angeles at a high-rise apartment, and this particular high-rise is scheduled to be demolished in a month. But there's still a few residents that haven't moved out yet. Now, among them is the family of Ellie Bixler and some neighbors. Now, Ellie, and I'm going to go over these particular characters in the order of their appearance. The first one, of course, sitting on the toilet taking the pregnancy test is Beth. That's the younger sister of Ellie, and she's a guitar tech and a roadie for a traveling band. And she came home to be with her sister because she just found out she's pregnant and doesn't know what to do. So Ellie Bixler is a tattoo artist and a single mother of three children. Her husband just recently left her. I think they said 2 months prior to that,
Yeah.
and with the children, she's just struggling to kind of stay to survive. Now the next person that we see is Bridget. She's the eldest daughter, and she's an upcoming activist, and she wants to be, you know, she wants to sit down there and fight power. Then,
Yeah. That I thought that was interesting. Like you have they're really It's a real 2023 movie. She's like, but mom, I'm supposed to go to a protest that day. You didn't clean the T-shirt I wanted to wear to that protest.
Uh-huh.
Where is it at?
Oh, and what's really interesting about this particular character, which I didn't know, I looked up her bio. She basically is a YouTuber. I think she was discovered, and she's a was a I'm sorry, social media person. I'm not sure which platform,
Yeah.
but that may have been where they found her.
Okay.
Now, a majority of these other actors and actresses are from the UK and New Zealand, which I also found interesting. And I think that they filmed part of this, if I'm not
Yeah, I
mistaken, in New
think that
Zealand.
I think the whole thing was filmed in New Zealand. I
Yeah.
think I saw that in the credits.
Hmm.
Yeah, and the director's from there too, so it makes sense.
Right. Okay. Then we have Jake and Scott, and they're two neighbors, and they're kind of sweet on Bridget. They actually stop by and they ask her to, you want, we're going to be watching some Friday the 13th movies. You want to watch with us? And of course, she shoos them away. So then we have Danny. Danny is the middle son, and he's an aspiring DJ. So he's back there, kind of kicking spinning some disc, and making too much noise, of course. So
Yeah.
Ellie is going to try to get him to cut it down. And the
Yeah, I don't
final,
know if I don't know. I had some trouble with this with a kid who was probably born in like 2008 with like no having such a sweet vinyl setup. I don't know if that's sort of destroyed my suspension of disbelief. It wasn't the Deadites, it was really that.
Mhm.
I'm not
But I will tell you this: it is kind of true that, all right, how do you get all that equipment and all those records?
yeah.
Because they're a struggling family. So yeah, I agree with you on that. That's probably one of the.
Well, well, it's just also the part there's a plot point that they're moving in a month, and like this apartment has got to be like the most densely set decorated
Yes.
environment I've like ever seen. Like look at that wall in the background just there. There's like 20 pictures on
Hmm.
like 5 square feet of wall. It's like and like the table's just covered in stuff everywhere. It's almost like candlelight in there there's
Yeah,
no
they haven't even
decent lighting.
begun to pack.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
As a matter of
exactly.
fact, I think there's one point in the show where she said something like, "Well, listen, I can't waste any more time with that. I got to start packing." I'm like, "Start? they're they're going to tear this thing down in a
Yeah.
month. You're just starting to pack?"
Yeah, and
Yeah.
there is candles on the table in that shot. There's no bright overhead lights anywhere in this apartment.
No. This is one of the darkest, literally, I mean, literally,
Yeah.
it was filmed so dark that even some of the screen caps I had trouble distinguishing. I had to really
Yeah.
pay close attention, but I was like, man, this is a very dark film. But then the final character that we're going to talk about right now is Cassie, and that's the youngest daughter. She's a little bit precocious and sweet and a little strange, but a cute little 8-year old. So we had the cute precocious little 8-year old. Okay, so this is the family of Ellie Bixler, and they're in their apartment on the 14th floor of this building. Now, Ellie is sitting there working on her tattoo gun, and Bridge is looking for a black T-shirt that she wants to wear to the protest. Danny's in his room DJing, and Cassie's working on her new doll. And she had borrowed her mother's scissors, which she's not supposed to because 8-year-olds aren't supposed to play with sharp objects. So she cuts off the doll's head, and Ellie goes around. She looks in the drawer for her scissors and sees her not there, and she yells to Cassie, she better not have her scissors. And Cassie then puts them on the floor and shoves them underneath the bed and says, I don't have them, Mom. Then she proceeds to basically, she takes the head, the doll that she just cut off, and she sticks it on I guess like a broomstick or something like that, a broomstick hand.
Yeah.
And then she
It's
names
qu-
the dog, she names that doll Stephanie. Okay.
yeah, that's pretty good. I mean, but it's like, it's an 8-year-old kid walking around with like a doll's head on a broomstick. It's quite a visual. I don't know what to really
Hmm.
make of it. Yeah, it just, these are some disturbed kids. Their mom's too into arts and crafts. They went. It's like Lord of the Flies in there. They're all just doing their own thing. Like, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. And so she said she feels like this doll will probably be able to protect her from any evil spirits that might be roaming the halls or something to that effect.
Prophetic.
Yeah, so yeah, really. So then the doorbell to the apartment rings, and Ellie yells to the kids to go answer. And of course, being kids, they don't go. So Ellie goes to answer the door, and she doesn't see anybody looking through the peephole. So then she opens the door, looks out into the hallway, and looks, and then her sister pops out and says, "Surprise!" And of course, she's like, "What in the world?" So she brings her sister into the apartment to start to catch up. And Beth says that she's got a problem that she's hoping that Ellie might be able to help her with and give her some wise counsel on. So we then see the family sitting around a table, and Beth is handing out some presents, and she says, "Well, I've got a gift for your husband." Of course, the room goes quiet. So Ellie tells Danny, he said, "Why don't you take your sisters and go out and pick up some pizza?" So while the kids are out getting pizza, Ellie tells Beth that her husband left her a few months ago, and Beth says, "Well, why didn't you tell me?" And Ellie says, "Listen, I called you several times and you never called back." Okay, so they're still sitting up there having sister time, and in the meantime, we get another shot down at the garage level where the kids have returned in the family car with the pizza, and so they pull into the underground garage, and we see a few random cars parked, as well as a wood chipper. Okay, the wood chipper is something you want to remember for later. Okay.
Nice, nice.
So as the children get out of the car and start walking towards the elevator, all of a sudden an earthquake hits. So they go ducking, looking for cover, and Ellie and Beth are upstairs on the 14th floor, and that apartment is shaking. And so of course they're looking for cover. Now after the quake stops, we now flash back down to the children, and of course they drop the pizza. Okay, that was probably the
The
worst.
yeah, the real tragedy here.
Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
that's the worst crime that they committed was dropping the pizza. But Danny says, "Hey, look," and he notices that a hole opened up above what looks like it's a secret room underneath
Yeah.
the garage.
Yeah,
Okay.
but real quick, Toms, did you
Yeah.
happen to notice the graphic art on the pizza box?
Yes. You
Yeah,
wanna
well, I just it just says Henrietta's Pizza,
pizza?
come get some or something like that. But
Mm-hmm.
this is the kind of this is for the aware fan, this is a reference to Evil Dead 2, where
Yes.
perhaps the most famous deadite monster is called Henrietta, which is
Henrietta.
the wife of Professor Nobi, who was locked in the bottom of the cabin, and she comes up and gives Ash a hard time. But I don't know if I don't know if I like the sort of fan service, because it's like, this is a reference, but it's like not plausible that it's the same Henrietta. So it's like, I don't know, like give me something a little bit more, give me something a little bit more entwined in the lore. They're just saying
Yeah.
words like
Well,
you know what I mean? I'm
I
not
I
sure if I
like
like that.
I like the fact that they took the time to give a little bit of a callback to the different movies. As a matter of fact, each of the characters is named after a character that was in one of the other previous franchise. For example, Bridget is named after Bridget Fonda, who was actually in the Ash versus Evil Dead. Let's see, I forget who Ellie was named after, but she
Well,
was
I
named
thought
after.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
no.
Go
Well, I
ahead.
mean, isn't I think Bridget Fonda's in the intro of Army of Darkness too. She's like the third Linda when they do the recap again for the third time. She's
Oh,
like yeah, in all
no,
three
I
Evil
didn't
Dead
know
movies,
about that.
Linda's a different actor. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, but so basically they do a callback to each of the people. Oh, you're right about that. That's right, because they did do a recap before he comes falling out of the sky, and I think
Yeah.
that was Bridget Fonda. Yeah, but yeah, so
For like a minute.
yeah,
Yeah.
so each
Yeah.
of the characters was named after one of the characters in one of the previous franchises. So, and they do several Easter eggs throughout here of nice little callbacks to there. So if you're paying attention, you say, "Oh, I remember when that happened in so and so," or "I remember when this kind of happened in there." And they kind of do their own little switch, their own little twist on it. So yeah, so we had Henrietta's Pizza, and of
Yeah.
course that pizza was kind of messed up at that point. But Danny then sees that there's a hole with this secret room, and he wants to go down and explore. And Bridge tells him not to, but of course he decides to anyway. So while he's down there, he climbs down, and while he's down there, he yells up to his sister. It looks like a vault. And this makes sense because see, the building used to be a bank. Now
Yeah.
here's the only now this is the only issue, the only real issue I had with this particular
Was it
with this.
was it
Why
that the
is
second was it that the second jump scare was Jesus? Because I
yeah,
thought that was
exactly.
funny. Yeah.
Why is there all right, how did they take why was there a 14-story bank that they converted into apartments? I'm
Yeah.
trying to figure out what's this a bank like they have, sometimes you might have a pizzeria and then you might have a house, somebody living over the top of it.
Yeah.
Over the bank, really? That I kind of didn't buy that
All
part.
right.
That's
Well, yeah. I mean, I think it was like the vault's clearly in the basement, but
mhm.
it's like you're telling me like they demolished the building, didn't clear out the foundation, and there's items still left behind in safety deposit boxes and stuff like that. I don't know. It's very careless. You know, you think with a bank you'd look around a little bit more, but there's some very choice exotic items left behind in this bank vault.
Yes. So he's looking around, and of course he gets a jump scare when the Jesus statue pops out by accident, and he
He'll get you.
continues to he get yeah exactly. You better get you some Jesus. Okay. So as Danny continues to explore, he comes across an area that has hundreds of crosses and religious medallions hanging from the ceiling, and so he's kind of looking around, and then he finds this box, and in that box he finds some records and something wrapped up in this kind of dirty burlappy looking covering, and Bridget starts yelling to him, "Listen, get up here. You know, we need to. There could be aftershocks. Come on up here." So he basically takes that, which basically was in that burlap sack. He opened it up and saw that it was a book. So he puts that book, and he also finds some records that were in that box. Also, he puts them in his knapsack, and he comes up and uh, and 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 gets up out of the vault area. Now, in
Yeah.
the meantime, upstairs on the 14th floor, Ellie is just freaking out because she's trying to call the kids, but there's no cell service. So she meets one of her neighbors, Gabriel. That's the next character we're going to introduce ourselves to, and he's just one of the neighbors. And she said that her kids, she can't contact them right now. Wants to see if she can borrow his car to go look for them. He says, "Well, listen, maybe I should drive. Give me a second to grab my keys." Now, as he's doing that, the elevator comes up and the children get off the elevator. So Ellie is relieved, and then she starts scolding the kids. He said, "Listen, don't ever take an elevator after an earthquake." And but then she gives him a big hug and a kiss because she's relieved that they're safe and back home. So when they get back to the apartment, Danny and Bridget go to Danny's room, and he shows her that book and says, "Do you think that this might be worth some money? Because, maybe we could sell it and do something to help mom out in our financial issues." Now, Bridget then scolds him for stealing the book, but Danny says,
Well,
"Listen, it's
typical Gen Zs, man. You know, they know the
mhm,
value of antique. They know antiques have inherent value, but they're not interested in the story. You know, they want to know. I don't know
right."
what this book is, man. Whatever. It's just, maybe we can put it on eBay or something.
hmm
I'm not.
Yeah, but then Danny reasons, okay, now this is the flawed reasoning. He says, "Well, nobody it's been down there for probably forever. Nobody's claimed it by now. So, I guess he's thinking in his mind, well, we can just call this abandoned property." Yeah, right. Okay. You
Well, they
stole a
built right
book.
over top of it. So, I mean,
Exactly. They put a garage over it. Now we have apartments. Nobody wants that book. Maybe we can sell it. So then he's trying to open the book, but it will not budge. Now this book, as you can see in there, actually has teeth on it. Okay.
what do you think of this book design compared to the other Necronomicons?
You know, I didn't get a chance to go back and see Army of Darkness. I was trying to go back and see if one of those books had teeth in it.
They're all different, I think.
Yeah, they're
And
all they're all different books,
yeah.
but I for some reason I seem to believe that one of the books had teeth on it, but I don't remember.
Oh, interesting. So you're thinking this is theoretically supposed to be one of the books in Army of Darkness,
Well,
roughly.
we're going to get to that in a minute. I'm gonna share some. I'm gonna drop a little bit of
Okay.
fun facts for you in just a minute.
Okay.
So Now, he's trying to open it up. He's trying to pry the book open, and it won't do it. And unfortunately, while he's doing it, he accidentally pricks his finger on one of those sharp teeth, and the blood from his finger drips on the book. Then the book begins to absorb the blood, and as soon as it does, the teeth start to separate, and now he can open up the book. So he opens up the book, and he and Bridget are looking at it. It has all these pictures of people being eviscerated. And, I mean, it's just
Yeah.
gross pictures. Okay, so Bridget gets freaked out, and she slams the book shut and tells Danny, "You need to put this back where you found it." And Danny says, "Look, Mom's not going to let us out of the apartment again tonight." She said, "Well, first thing in the morning." So she leaves his room. And then, of course, immediately, being a little brother, Danny opens the book back up and starts to look at it. And then he decides, hey, it's time for me to find out what's on those records. So he takes the first record out and puts it on the turntable and starts to run it. And as he's playing it, he hears a bunch of people that sound like, clergymen or something like that. And they're arguing about this book. And someone says, they call it the Book of the Dead for a reason. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, here's a fun fact. Now, the director, Lee Cronin, has suggested that what they should do is use the three books from the Army of Darkness to connect all the movies. So basically, what's now canon is that the first book of the Dead is canon to the original Evil Dead 2, Army of Darkness, and Ash versus the Evil Dead. So basically, anything with Bruce Campbell in it is the first book.
Okay.
The second book was used in the 2013 reboot. And this third book is The Evil Dead Rise. So in the Army of Darkness, the belief is that people found the three books and somehow they made their way to those different places, and that's how all of these movies kind of connect, is through those through how we saw the three Necronomicon in Army of Darkness.
I don't know. I haven't watched the remake in a while, but I don't know if that works. Like in the remake, is it not Professor Noby who's like on the recordings and all that, or it's somebody else? I don't know. Like how's the, like, I can't remember in the remake how the Deadites get unleashed. In the original, they play a record of Professor Noby translating the Sumerian text. In this, it's like a priest from the 1920s doing it. I can't remember what triggers it in the remake.
In the remake, they did the same thing. There, wait a minute. Oh, no. It wasn't a record. Wait, it wasn't a recording? I know that one of the characters was reading the book, and I can't remember if he read the text or
he can
if
read
it
ancient Sumerian. Is this guy Zachariah Sitchin or something? What's he? How does he know how to read ancient Sumerian? I don't think anybody knows how to read.
I want to say that I think there was another recording.
Okay, well, I'm just wondering.
I'd have to go back and watch that movie to just verify.
All right.
But I seem to remember that there was probably another recording that he was playing. Of course, being too curious and not realizing that if you have a book that is made out of human skin and the drawings are made out of human blood, that's not the book you want to read.
I'm just hoping that it's not a tape of Professor Noby from a different cabin, because that's really silly. Darth Tamras was really into the makeup effects of our lead here. They're pretty good.
They did an amazing job. Now, so I'm not sure about that, but I seem to believe, I'd have to go back and check, but I believe that there was another recording that actually did the text.
Yeah,
that kind of started things off.
Yeah, I got to give that remake another shot, but I'm guessing the director did his due diligence and it makes sense. I just at first thought, I'm like, that the plot's real similar to the original movie, so I'm supposed to believe that this happened in the same universe. Yeah. I don't know.
And that could be the reason why in the first movie you have a bunch of kids on college break going to a shabby cabin in the woods, okay, which of course there were no black people. and that's the reason for that
Well,
because we don't go to shabby cabins in the wood.
Thomas, I
We're
think
not
you'll
going to do that.
find that based on the relatively small sample size, it's statistically probable that if there's only 4 people, it's not in North America. It's possible that they're all white by statistical purposes. But anyways,
And then of course in the second movie, well, of course, oh my God, that's right. There was a black person in that movie. She just disproved my whole theory.
there you go.
Oh man. All right. Well, anyhow, in the second movie, you had a bunch of friends who went to a cabin because they wanted to detox one of the characters' sisters. Now that, all right, the plot of that, I think that's one of the issues I had is that you're not trained in how are you going. I mean, detoxing people. Well, it's mainly more dangerous for alcoholic detox, but any kind of detox can put a strain on the body. Why do you want to go out to an abandoned cabin in the woods trying to
Yeah.
get somebody off of drugs when you all are not trained in it?
Yeah, you're talking about that remake. Well, there's a lot
Yeah.
of I guess if you don't have the ability to convince your friends to seek professional help, you might take matters into your own hands. But yeah, I don't know, man. It's there's you as you can see, there's a lot of weird personal situations get people out to these cabins. Ash in
Mhm.
the first movie thought it'd be a good idea to propose to his girlfriend out in a cabin like that or something. Imagine thinking that's a good idea, Thomas. That's
Yeah.
You don't even like that cabin at all. You wouldn't think of it as a special
Yeah.
romantic location. You just want to
And then he
leave.
gave her, all right, and dig this, all right. He gave her a magnifying glass necklace. Ha, is ha, have
What
you
even
ever
is that
given
thing?
have you ever given a woman a magnifying glass as a
Well,
gift?
I know all I can tell you about that is as someone who has listened to the audio commentaries of all those movies, Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell both think it's hilarious and stupid, but
It is
they went with it.
hilarious
They
and
went with
stupid.
it
Yeah,
anyways. I don't know where they got it from. They got it from some cheap dollar store or something right before the shoot. Who knows, man?
yeah. I'm like, what kind of gift? And then she swooned over it. She's like, oh, this is so beautiful. I'm like, wait a minute, come on. You must
Acting.
not,
Yeah,
y'all must not know women, okay? Because I
they
have never,
tried.
I've never that must have been before they got famous and they started getting women because I don't know any woman that would be swooning over a magnifying glass necklace. But that's neither here nor there. Now, anyhow, while while Danny is listening to the records, Ellie's is decides to take some laundry down to the washing machine and do some laundry, and Beth is helping Cassie take a bath. So she's doing her little cute stuff and being a cute little girl, and Ellie takes her basket down the hallway, and takes the elevator down to the ground level. Now, while she's taking down the laundry, Danny puts on the second record where someone is actually reciting the incantation, and as that person's reciting it, Danny realizes that something's wrong. So he tries to turn it off. He's pushing the button, trying to turn it off, and all right, so he's trying to turn it off, and the first thing I yelled out was, "Take take the needle off of the record. You don't have to
Is that
turn it
how that
off."
works?
That's how it
Okay.
works. Now, of course, he tried to do it, but then, of course, some evil force was keeping him from lifting it, and then he got shocked by it. Something shocked him, and so the record keeps playing. Now we get to see the first person demon cam, a real one, and it's speeding through the garage, and Ellie has just ridden the elevator down to the bottom floor, and as soon as she get there and the doors open, the deadite spirit rams her back into and forces her back on the elevator. Now, then the doors close and some force shoves Ellie to the top of the elevator, and the elevator begins to fall up. Okay, it doesn't fall down because it's on the bottom floor. It literally pushes up at breakneck speed up until it gets back to the 14th floor. And then it abruptly stops and she falls to the ground. Now, Ellie is starting to struggle trying to get off the elevator, and she uses her keys. She's trying to pry it open with her keychain, and then all of a sudden she hears something, and she drops the keys. Now, then all of a sudden, cables start coming out from all direction out of the elevator. One grabs her by the neck and tries to strangle her, and then the other ones grab her arms and her legs.
Yeah, it's quite a visual. It's very evocative of some wild stuff that happens in the first and second movie. But
Exactly, yeah. That,
but
did
it,
but all right. So this is a call back to there when of course the in those movies where the Woods have their way with Ash's sister, but
yeah.
in this movie, all right, that you know, because on a podcast I saw, he said the guy said that they stopped her in one of those Super Mario poses, and it really did look
Yeah.
like that. She kind of looked like Super Mario Brothers.
Yeah, well, it's kind of weird, right? Because like basically this is sort of the last image we see of her, and then when she comes back around, she's not really the same person anymore, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so then all of a sudden, I believe that's when the power goes out. So they try to fix the breakers in the apartment. Nothing's helping. The kids are looking out the window, and they realize that they're the only ones without power. The rest of the block has power. And so they ask Beth where mom is, and just then the kids turn towards the front door and they see Ellie staggering in. And Ellie goes straight to the kitchen and turns on the burner to the gas oven, and she decides she's going to cook some eggs.
Yeah. Well,
So
check out the shot. Check out the shot for a second, Thomas. So, does
yeah,
anything there's a specific technique at play here that turns up a lot in this movie. Does anything look weird about this shot to you off the top of your head?
it's so dark I can't really see it clearly.
Okay. Well, you have a face, you have a face in the foreground real close,
Uh huh.
and then you have the rest of the family sort of standing about 10 feet back. Now,
Right.
as the way cameras work, it is literally not possible for her face to be that close and in focus
Okay.
as well as
Right.
the people in the background, right? So
Mm-hmm.
what they do is they put a lens on an attachment on the lens that's called a split diopter,
Right.
which is like basically it like allows you to have 2 points of distance in focus at once, but it's sort of like you get this weird sort of blurred line down the middle that doesn't really make any sense. Like you can sort of see there's some like some color.
Yeah,
There's sort
kind of
of a
like De
color line that
Palma
doesn't
did
make
in
sense.
Carrie.
Yeah, exactly. You got it, but
Mm-hmm.
I feel like when I was watching this movie, he uses it like 10 times, and like I don't know. It's one of those things where like when I see it, it stands out to me because it almost looks like a composite element where like it's almost like to me it almost looks like they put an element in the foreground like from a green screen plate shot or something. Just like if you play around with cameras a lot, it's unsettling to look at because it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
But anyways,
That
yeah.
also and that also might be a reason why everything is so dark, because it helps that blurred line just kind of blend
Yeah.
into the background. So,
Yeah,
but
it's
yeah.
the just the terribly lit apartment continues to
Mm-hmm.
there's a candle on the stovetop somewhere. That's all
Right.
you got.
And so then she starts cooking eggs. Now, I don't know where she attended cooking school, but typically when I cook eggs, and I'm not a big egg aficionado, I like to crack my eggs to put the eggs and then I throw away the shells. Well, what Ellie does is that she just starts throwing whole eggs into the thing,
Yeah.
cooking them, shelling out. Well, I guess she wanted them to have some little crunchy parts.
Yeah,
Maybe
that
that,
reminds me of like, but in like some of the George Romero zombie movies, like
hmm
they allude to the fact that like uh some of the zombies like have like vague memories of like who they used to be and what they used to do. Like you got the guy in Land of the Dead who's like he's still pumping gas even though there hasn't been
hmm
a car come by in like 10 years or something. Like it reminded me a little bit of that where it's like
hmm
there's like muscle memory that she knows she's supposed to do this thing, but the person is gone.
Exactly. So then all the kids gather by the kitchen while she's doing this, and Ellie tells them that she had a dream. She says that she dreamt that she had cut them all open and crawled inside of them so they could all be together as a family. And I'm like, okay, that's a lovely sentiment to tell to an 8-year-old and her two teenage siblings. But then she drops the skillet on the floor and she drops to the ground and she starts crawling towards the opening in the kitchen where the rest of the family's standing. And when she gets there, she starts to vomit this putrid white gooey stuff. And guess who just became a deadite? Okay. So before she becomes completely possessed, she looks at Beth and pleads with her not to let it take her babies. And then she collapses onto the ground and they presume she's dead. Now, Beth begins dragging her sister down the hallway, asking if anyone can help her get her sister to get some medical assistance. And the neighbors start thinking of different ways to get out. Now, the elevator doesn't look like a safe because the doors are just kind of opening and closing. And Danny goes to the stairwell and sees that the stairwell is gone. He said the stairwell's gone. And of course, it's been ripped up now. That also is a callback to the first two Evil Dead movies, where the bridge that they crossed over kind of got ripped
Yeah.
into like a pretzel thing. So
Yeah.
that seems to be the way that the Deadites like to keep people where they are. So they always like to rip up steel.
Well,
Okay.
that was like the 80s equivalent of finding a reason why the cell phones don't work, basically you got to imagine this children, like your lifeline back in the day was that there was a freaking road so that you could
Hmm.
leave on. So basically the horror movie implodes the road so you can't drive down it.
Exactly.
That's equivalent of the cell phone network being down.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So then Gabriel, who's out in the hallway, says, "Well, there is a fire escape, but you have to go through. I think it was like room 83 or something like that. But this is a room that actually is boarded up. It was unsafe because I think something happened in there, so the room has been boarded up. And now I'll tell you what, they did a good job of securing that room. They had like steel bars over it with locks, and I'm like, what happened in that room? So he and Mr. Fonda start making attempts to open the door. Now Gabriel, but then I think they stop for a second and they help get Ellie back into her room and they put her into bed. And Beth is talking to Gabriel and Mr. Fonda, and Gabriel says, "Can I pray for her?" So she said, "Well, she's not religious," but he said, "Well, it couldn't hurt." So they start to pray. Then Gabriel and Mr. Fonda leave, and I guess they're out there in the hallway again, trying to open up that abandoned apartment. So Beth is sitting with Ellie, and she starts to hear her telephone, and her sister's voice is coming out of it. Her sister's eyes suddenly open up, and and the voice is saying, "I'm burning up." So Beth touches her, and her eyes are wide open. Beth touches Ellie, and her skin feels hot to the touch. So she and Danny take her to the bathtub, which still has water in it from Cassie's bath. They didn't drain the tub. So they put
Well,
Ellie in
this
the.
is this is like a pre-technology apartment complex, Thomas. They
Uh,
save the water. It's like 1800 style,
I
candlelight,
love it. so, so they put Ellie in the water, and she begins to scream and convulse. And then all of a sudden, she jumps out of the bathtub and starts climbing on the ceiling. Okay, clear deadite move. Okay,
Yeah,
they love walking on the ceiling and levitating.
yeah, and this is the makeup job Darth Tamaris was talking about.
It was
You know,
awesome.
yeah, it's like in the earlier movies, sometimes the Deadites just have straight white eyes, but you
Hmm.
really lose that very pointed direction that they're looking at. They don't really
Yeah.
connect with your soul in a way. When it's fully white, you don't really know what they're looking at, and you just imagine the poor actor stumbling around between takes. But
Hmm.
this is some pretty fierce stuff.
Yeah, they did an amazing job with the makeup. And so this happens. So Bridget grabs Cassie and takes her into the other room, while Danny and Beth are trying to deal with the dead-eyed Ellie. Now, then all of a sudden, Ellie goes limp and she falls from the ceiling back into the water. And then all of a sudden, Beth and Danny see Ellie's hands, and she starts climbing out of the tub. So they scamper out of the bathroom, and Ellie's following them. Now, Ellie starts to attack a different family member. I can't remember which one. But Bridget comes on out of the bedroom and gets slammed to the floor by Ellie. So Ellie then reaches to the table and grabs her tattoo gun. And she starts taking it, and she starts bringing it closer and closer to Bridget's eye. So Bridget turns her head, and Ellie starts basically the tattoo needles start digging into Bridget's cheek. So
Yeah. Well, what
Danny,
this reminded me of so much
what's
was
that?
like there was like a viral story like a few weeks ago of like some dingus who like went blind because they got so much tattoos literally right on their eyeball.
Oh my
And it's like,
gosh.
serves you right. Anyways, hey, look, we got Dean in the chat. What's up,
Hey,
Dean?
Dean,
Thanks for turning
yo,
up.
back at you.
Yeah, man. But yeah, basically if you get eyeball tattoos and you go blind, it's like
You
it's
deserve it.
like it's karma,
Yeah,
it's the one but
you had it coming if you
yeah.
decided to do that.
Yeah.
Really, you
This is
did.
the eyeball tattoo scene of the movie, Mom forcibly attempts to eyeball tattoo her teenage
Hmm.
daughter. It's pretty
Yeah.
extreme stuff.
So then Danny grabs a metal chair and smashes Ellie in the face, throwing her across the room towards the kitchen. Now Ellie starts. Then all of a sudden Ellie gets up and the family is standing there. She starts playing Eeny Meeny Miny Mo to see who she's going to go after next. And just when she's about to point to Cassie, Gabriel and Jake open up the door. Now, Gabriel and Jake, Gabriel's, of course, the one who's praying for her. Jake is one of the kids that want to watch movies with Bridget in the beginning. Well, they open up the door to the apartment to come in, and so Ellie chases them back out into the apartment, into the hallway. So Beth and the kids shut and lock the door behind her, and they push a heavy piece of furniture in front of the door to make sure it was secure. Meanwhile, in the hallway, Ellie jumps on Gabriel and bites out his left eye out of the socket.
Yeah.
She spits it across the room, which flies into Jake's mouth, and he chokes to death on it. Now, this is a callback to, of course, Evil Dead 2.
Hearing that in words, man, is just something else. But yeah, hearing that just verbally described rather than seeing it. But these guys are just a couple of red shirts, like they're just here purely to get killed. They got nothing to say.
That's their job. That's their only
Yeah.
job is to be killed.
Yeah.
But that's a callback to Evil Dead 2, which that's the reason why I found the first two Evil Deads I thought was horror comedy, because when that eyeball flew across the room into that girl's mouth,
Yeah, she was
I
just so
thought-
disgusted. It was like life was over.
I thought that was the funniest thing I had ever seen, especially it was the way it was flying across the room. And but this one actually was kind of scary, the way they did it in here. This was not funny.
Yeah, I don't
when
know if
that
it landed
happens.
as a joke, if that was the intention. I don't recall laughing about it this time around. Yeah.
Yeah, I did not laugh this time. Now, Beth is looking through the peephole to see what's going on, and she sees Scott, the other kid from the beginning, flying across the hallway, and he gets slams into the wall in front of the apartment, and I believe that killed him instantly. Then she sees Mr. Fonda take out a shotgun. He shoots down the hallway to Ellie, and then she sees her. Then Ellie comes out and attacks Mr. Fonda, and the shotgun goes off again, and he's dead. And then the last one we see is Gabriel, who basically comes up to the peephole and he's screaming, begging to be let in. But Ellie grabs him and then she dispatches him also. So in the apartment, Bridget comments to Danny that Ellie looks a lot like one of those pictures that was in the book. And she tells him that he must have caused all this, which he denies. Danny then starts to realize he actually was the one who started off all this by playing that record. So he tells Beth that he needs to show her something. So they go into the bedroom, and he shows her the book and the records, and he also explains to Beth that the second record had the incantation on it, but it was too dangerous to be played. And he said, "Well, we can't even do it if we wanted to, because there's no electricity." Now, of course, Beth is a roadie, and she knows how to bypass this problem. So she rigs up some wires, hooks them to some batteries, and basically makes a makeshift power supply. And she hooks up the headphones, and she's ready to play one of the records. Now, while Danny and Beth are in the bedroom talking about what he found in the vault, Bridget's starting to look a little bit worse, and she starts seeing that I think she's looking in the mirror or something, and sees that the wound that tattoo needle caused in her cheek is starting to ooze black goo. And then all of a sudden, this black goo starts dripping from other orifices, her eyes, her ears. And then the next thing you know, she starts to vomit a black gooey mess with bugs and creepy stuff in it. And looks like she's starting to turn into a deadite.
Yeah.
So while that's happening, Cassie's at the front door looking through the peephole, being a cute 8-year-old. And she sees her mother sitting with her back to her in the hallway. And she's speaking real sweet to her, says, "Oh, Cassie, there you are," she said. And she said, "Can you let me in? Let me in the apartment." You know how the Deadites like to switch
What a
over
look.
to the nice
Yeah.
voices. And so she comes over to the people. She's looking a hot mess. And Cassie says, "You don't look so good." She says, "Well, it's nothing that a hug and a kiss from you won't solve." And I'm like, I'm sitting there thinking, okay, this kid cannot be that dumb. I mean, come on.
Well,
Your
she turns
mom.
out to be like the smartest of the three kids,
Oh,
pretty
yes,
much. Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. But I'm sitting here thinking, there is no way she's going to open that door. All right, well, she opens it. But fortunately, the door still has a chain on it. So when she opens the door, Ellie reaches in and grabs Cassie by the neck. So Danny and Beth hear that and they go rushing out of the bedroom to the front door. They grab Cassie and pull her back in to safety, and they push Ellie back into the hallway and close and lock the door. Then the three of them start hearing a noise coming from the kitchen, and they look in and they see that Bridget's crouched on the counter and she's eating a glass of wine. And when I say she's eating a glass of wine, I mean she's literally eating a glass
Yeah.
that has wine in it.
Yeah, this is good. I mean, like she looks like a praying mantis or something like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like her neck's all broken up and she's chewing on
Hmm.
the glass.
And
And the
as
one,
she's chewing on the glass, you can see the glass shards going down her neck.
yeah, the one thing I really enjoyed about this part is that, it lets you know that thank God the kids are not safe. Like I
Right.
want to make this is not an Evil Dead movie if these kids are going to survive just because they're kids.
Hmm.
It's like there hasn't been a lot of kids in the other movies, but it's like nobody's safe. That's what I want to. If the kids have plot armor in the face of a Kandarian demon, then you're really taking me out of the movie. And
Right.
and basically, once you're possessed like this, you don't really come back. I mean, the one time
Hmm.
Ash got possessed, the sunlights make it go away that one time in Evil Dead 2. But
Hmm.
who knows if that I think that sort of that plot thread remanifested itself down the road anyways.
And
But
then, like in Army of Darkness, he split into good Ash and bad
yeah.
Ash.
Oh, wow, that'd be wild. Maybe but it does sort of call to mind, like, there's I mean, it's so hard to imagine these films in the same frame in the same universe. But like you have some fun scenes in Army of Darkness where Ash drinks a boiling kettle just to like kill like some little things that are inside him, which is kind of similar to the line that this girl says. But it's just good creepy stuff. She's eating
Hmm.
glass. She's chewing on a wine glass. Is fun stuff.
Yeah. And so Aunt Beth is in the kitchen with her, and then she starts backing out of the kitchen. So, but she stumbles and falls, and she realized I got to get out of here. So she scrambles to get out of there, and while she's there, there's a cheese grater on the floor, which she accidentally pushes back, which goes directly into the hands of Bridget. So Bridget must have thought that Aunt Beth was a block of cheese because she began to grate her thigh. Okay.
Yeah, that's a great novel weapon, using a cheese grater. Like it's just, it's something the average person's familiar with. It's not terribly effective at killing someone, but man, that is graphic and you don't want to
Hmm.
imagine it. And it's
Yes.
it's a good it's I can't say I'm sure it's been done at least once, but I can't say I recall it being used in this fashion before in a horror film. It's pretty
I
good.
don't either. Yeah. And so then Beth slaps Bridget off her, and so Bridget jumps up and starts chasing after Cassie. Now, as she comes to Cassie, Cassie's sitting in the corner, and she's holding Stephanie. So then all of a sudden, she sticks Stephanie straight up, and it essentially impales Bridget through the mouth, and it comes out the back of her head. So
Yeah.
Stephanie actually did protect her like she thought she was going to. So kudos to Stephanie.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
The teenage girl zombie gets a broom pole stuck through the back of her head. It's there. No
Mhm.
holds barred here. There's anything can happen. It's crazy.
Right. So then Beth decides that she has to go back in there. She's already set up the recording equipment because she said, I need to find out what's on this record. So she decides to grab. She said, "Look, all the bad stuff is in the front. Let me grab the last record and work my way up from there." So she puts the record on and then puts on a headset, and and the record begins to play, and the person on the record explains that the book cannot be destroyed, and it's best to bury it deep in the earth where no one can find it. Of course, which is what it was. It was buried until Danny decided
Eh,
he wanted to sell it for money.
it wasn't buried that deep, and it was like a bit
That's
conspicuous.
true, yeah. But it had concrete around it. And of course, however, it was in California where there's lots of earthquakes. So that wasn't the most secure place, but at least it was up there for a while.
Yeah.
Now, while Beth has been listening to the record, Danny um, uh, had already taken Bridget and wrapped her up and in a blanket and then bound her because he wanted to make sure she couldn't get back up. And they went out to look to see where she was, and she wasn't there anymore. So all of a sudden, he looks around, and Bridget's there in that blanket or whatever she was covered up. But I think it was like some sort of camouflage blanket. But she's hovering like a ghost, and all of a sudden she's levitating, and she comes flying at them, and the two of them go flying into the kitchen and up against the stove, which has the gas flame still burning. So Bridget grabs one of the kitchen knives and stabs Danny in the arm, which of course Danny screams. Then Danny sees something flammable, a flammable spray bottle on the counter. So he takes that spray bottle and sprays it into that flame on the stove, which then shoots out towards Bridget and catches her on fire. So
Yeah.
she's basically burning to death, and she drops to the ground, and then she's not moving. Now, in the meantime, that stab is basically Danny's bleeding out. Now, Beth is still listening to the record. Okay, she doesn't hear any of this that's going on.
And here's another one of those split diopter shots where it's like you see that back wall with all the shelving and stuff in
Hmm.
focus, but then for some inexplicable reason, it's totally out of focus, like right down the middle of the shot, so they can have that hand in the middle. I don't know, man. That drives me nuts. It's an old technique, but it's like I don't know that it's something very off-putting about it, in my opinion.
And to me, I have to say that I I think that it would be a little bit more powerful for the evil presence to be out of focus in this one, because there's the evil dead. However, I mean, it's probably Ellie, but to just see her back there out of
Yeah.
focus, I think actually gives you a little bit more suspense.
Yeah,
But
yeah, it's just a physically impossible
right,
thing, but they two elements of glass, whatever. I've been
yeah.
over it.
But basically, Ellie has snuck into the apartment through the air vents. So Ellie pulls the headphone jack out. Then she takes her fingernail. The turntable's still turning, so she takes her fingernail and puts it on the record, and then opens her mouth. And all of a sudden, the words of the priest are coming out of her mouth. And actually, she was coming. She was there in stereo. So I don't know if she had surround sound, but she was a pretty good speaker. So
Nice.
you heard the clergyman actually go in there. So Beth rushes towards Ellie and tries to stab her in the neck, and Ellie slaps Beth across the room, and he lands next to Ellie, and then lands next to Danny rather, and Danny's still bleeding out. So then Ellie goes there, and she starts sniffing around her belly, of course, because we know that she says, "We're going to eat your soul," in that creepy deadite voice. And then she smells her belly. She says, souls. And
Nothing like threatening an unborn child, that's
exactly, right.
advanced horror techniques.
Yeah. So Cassie is sitting there in the background, and she remembers the scissors that she had shoved under the bed earlier in the movie, the scissors she's not supposed to be using. So she grabs them and slides them across the floor towards Beth. And then Beth grabs him and shoves him into Ellie's face. And basically, Ellie's sitting there with a pair of scissors stuck in her skull, jammed in there pretty tight. And then she slumps to the floor. And Danny looks at Cassie and apologizes for causing all of this. And then he goes, he's dispatched. So Beth grabs Cassie, and they start running out into the hallway to see if they can find a way out of the building. And she sees Mr. Fonda lying on the ground with his shotgun and shells. So she picks it up and says, well, maybe I can go ahead and shoot through the door of that abandoned room, and they can go down the fire escape. So she tells Cassie to turn around and don't look and cover her ears. But when she does so, she hears Ellie running down the hallway at her, and this startles Beth. So she turns around and accidentally lets off a shot, and basically it shoots off Ellie's left leg. So she falls to the ground. Now, then all of a sudden, all of the recently deceased have now turned into deadites, and they start getting up, chanting "Dead by Dawn," and they're converging together. So Beth grabs Cassie, and they go running down the hall towards the elevator. Now, the elevator doors are still opening and closing. She's trying to push the down button. It won't work. And then Cassie, the smart young lady that she is, sees her mother's keys that she had dropped in the elevator earlier when the elevator was assaulting her. So she grabs the keys. All of a sudden, the doors shut, and she's able to put, and they are able to push down. But when they push down, all of a sudden, you start seeing red covering all the buttons on the elevator as it starts rising up. And the elevator starts filling up with blood. So in the hallway, the bodies have now converged, and they turn into what that Book of the Dead says is the Leviathan.
Yeah.
I just call it the Blob because it looks like a big blob, but a Leviathan is the proper name for it.
Yeah, I
So
guess that's sort of like the big red apple monster from the end of Evil Dead 2. That's just
yeah,
sort of like it takes up the whole door for its face
hmm
basically, and it's like trying to
yeah,
eat Ash before he gets teleported back in time at the end. Something like that.
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
So they're sitting there. It starts. They converge and they go down the hallway to the elevator. Now, as the elevator is filling up with blood to the point where they're almost drowning, um, the Leviathan has now gotten into the elevator shaft and climbs on top of the elevator. But the extra weight that of the Leviathan has now exceeded the weight limit of the elevator. So of course
Hate
the
to see it.
elevator goes crashing from the 14th floor down to the bottom. Now the crash forces the elevator doors open, and Cassie and Beth, who've been floating around in the bloody liquid, then go um, flowing out of the elevator shaft, out of the elevator. Now this right here actually was a reference to The Shining. And those of you who know The Shining know the bloody elevator scene. This is kind of
Yeah.
a reference to that.
Yeah, they're sort
Um,
of cherry picking some classic visuals here to sort of I don't know, man. I think they're relying on I can't decide whether they're relying on people's familiarity with these things or just deciding that they're iconic and putting them in here for the sake of capturing a generation who's never seen it before. But they're tasteful references.
yeah, exactly. So then they get up and they go running to the family car, and they find it. They jump in the car and put the keys in. And what do you know? The car actually starts. Now we know that in every movie, every horror movie, the car never starts. Well, this time it does. So they go pulling out. They go towards the garage door, but unfortunately, that garage door is very slow. It's like a gate. And they're waiting for the garage door to open so they can pull out. But then they see the Leviathan behind them has now come out of the elevator shaft and is coming towards them. So they get out of the car and they decide to kind of try to go through. They feel like they might have a little bit better chance if they're not trapped in the car when that thing gets there. So they're kind of going around the car. The Leviathan's going around the car, and the gate's starting to close. So they make a rush for the door. Beth rolls under the door and is able to make it through. But unfortunately, 8-year-old Cassie is not fast enough, and the Leviathan grabs her foot and pulls her back into the garage as the doors close. So they drag Cassie towards the wood chipper, and there's a chainsaw there. So Ellie's speaking to Cassie, and she says, "I just want to take your head and add you to our family." Okay, and she kind of says that very sweetly. And then all of a sudden, we've seen a little bit earlier that um, uh, Beth made it back into the garage. She had actually pried apart some janky part of the garage door and was able to get it open by the gate. And so she gets in, and then we hear a gunshot, and we see Beth standing behind the Leviathan. And the Leviathan throws the chainsaw towards Beth's head, but she ducks, and she drops the shotgun. And Leviathan pulls her towards the wood chipper and turns it on and tries to push her in. So it's actually on top of the wood chipper and is pulling her in. Well, Cassie, of course, she was a very smart girl. She actually was paying attention. She saw when the Leviathan turned it on, so she knew how to turn it off. So she grabbed the lever and she turned the wood chipper off. The Leviathan then climbs down from the top of the wood chipper, and I guess he's trying to look and say, "Oh, something gets stuck in there." And in the meantime, Beth has gone back and grabbed the chainsaw, and she yells for Cassie to go turn it back on. And so then she uses the chainsaw to push the Leviathan back into the wood chipper. So the wood chipper starts dissecting and dicing and slicing the Leviathan. And the last remaining head that we see is Ellie's. So Ellie used a childhood pet name for Beth. I think she called her Bethy Boo or something like that to garner sympathy from her. But Beth tells the Leviathan, "Only my sister can call me that." So she shoves a chainsaw into her head, and of course that is what we see as the end of the Leviathan. So Beth then takes Cassie by the hand and picks up the chainsaw, and they both walk out of the parking garage. Okay. Next
Yeah.
morning. Okay. So that was the day before. Now the next morning, we have a young woman who comes out of her apartment. And she's talking to her cousin Teresa. This is Jessica, who we saw in the beginning credits. Jessica wants to back out of the trip. I mean, Teresa wants to back out of the trip to the lake because she just doesn't want to be a third wheel, and she's just not feeling it. And she says, "Look, and in the meantime, Jessica's been trying to take the elevator, but it's not working." Now, evidently, she wasn't on the 14th floor. She must have been on one of the lower floors because the stairwell, she was able to get in the stairwell and go down to the
Well,
garage.
she's also, I don't know, she had a rough night and somehow missed like all of the chaos and murders
Exactly.
and all
She
that
felt the
good
earthquake,
stuff.
but she didn't hear the bloody elevator crash and any
Yeah.
of
Well,
that.
those old buildings, the brick walls and stuff, it's a
Very
lot
well
better
insulated.
soundproofing. Yeah.
Exactly, soundproofing. So so she gets to the parking garage and she tells Teresa, "Look, I'm not taking no for an answer. I'm picking you up in 15 minutes." So she hangs up the phone, and the next thing you know, then all of a sudden she turned around and she notices all of the blood and viscera on the floor of the garage. Okay. And then she turns around and sees the wood chipper. It has lots of guts and stuff over there. And she
Yeah.
covers her mouth in horror. And this is when we see the first person demon cam flying through the garage as Jessica turns around and opens her mouth to scream.
Yeah, what a convenient device the non-visual demon cam is, I mean, like you can just accent scenes in fun little ways like that. Now, when this shot came up, I was real disappointed that the camera didn't go all the way inside her mouth as it did to Ash 2 or 3
Yeah.
times. It's like just, like you just finish it off with a digital zoom, like you got, but it's close, but it doesn't quite get there,
Yeah.
But
Now
it's fun.
I will give another callback. Now there was a part where Beth was going towards the Leviathan and she had the chainsaw. When she was running, that was a callback to Ash from the Evil Dead. Do you remember there's a scene when he was running and it looked like he was running in like part time where he was kind of moving fast but moving slow at the same time? They
Yeah.
filmed her in the exact same way as that. So they kind of did a lot of things in addition to the books being tied together. They pulled
Okay.
references from the different movies, I guess to maybe pay a little homage to that,
Yeah.
which I kind of appreciate a little bit of that. I I don't have a huge problem with it, as it's nice to see what another director does with it. And I have to admit that in the Bruce Campbell way, which I really enjoyed, I found it to be more humorous. In this one, it actually, even though it's filmed in the same way, in the same vein, I actually found it to be much scarier the way it was filmed in this one. This one actually felt more like a horror movie to me. It didn't, even though there were some funny moments, it didn't feel like a horror comedy to me.
Yeah.
Whereas the original Evil Dead movies felt like, and the TV show felt like more like a horror comedy to me, which I actually, that's what I liked about them. But I really liked the fact that it was well thought out, and it was scary. But the difference between this and the reboot was that this movie, being shot as a horror movie, it didn't have quite as much. It didn't have as much. The other movie was actually more. The 2013 reboot was bloodier and had more guts and blood and
Yeah, I
killing in it.
agree.
But this one felt scarier to me than that movie. That movie just felt like a bloody mess, whereas this one to me felt like it was a little bit more well thought out, and I felt like the characters were a little more well developed. So I kind of felt myself being drawn into their world.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, I agree. I don't know. It's one of those things where it's like the initial series is so iconic that
Hmm.
it's real stiff competition, man. And you know, it's nice to see that Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell are credited as executive producers, and they were doing some press for it. And I think Rob Tappert, who was yeah, he was part of the effects team, I think, way back on the second one,
Hmm.
and
I
maybe,
think
and
so.
he's had an effects company for a number of years. I think he's the producer on this.
Yeah, he is.
So, you
He's
know,
one of
it's
the
got some of the
producers. Yeah.
original guys, but you know, I don't know. To me, it's kind of like I would I would still rather a feature film ending to Ash versus the Evil Dead than this stuff. I don't know what
Mm,
to tell you, man.
yeah.
But so let's see how much
But
carnage.
I do enjoy the fact that they gave him free reign to kind of see his vision
Yeah,
of it, and that's actually kind of nice when the people who actually own the franchise are of that give the other director the opportunity to basically impose their vision on it, and
yeah.
that's actually very admirable of them to
Well,
do that without having their thumb too heavily on the movie.
Well, you know, we're gonna get another example of a very similar structure soon when Alien Romulus comes out, because that is
Mm.
directed by Fede Alvarez, who directed the Evil Dead remake. He's doing Alien next, and it's executive
Oh.
produced by Ridley Scott. So it's a little bit of a similar structure where you have the OG creators sort of overseeing the project, but the, you know, 20th Century Studios is like, I don't know, Ridley Scott, you're getting about 80, you're popping off and on you're getting headlines from saying offensive stuff all the time these days, you know, like you're still good, but I don't know if we want you doing any more of those crazy alien movies. Like the last one was pretty weird. Michael Fassbender is you know, just this evil mastermind, and no one really knows what's going on. but but yeah, so like how much carnage really was there in Evil Dead Rise? Thomas, you were telling me about a fun channel that does kill counts on movies, and
Yes.
we thought we'd share that here.
Yeah, absolutely. If any of you out in the chat have are looking for a really good really good commentary, I would recommend that you go to this channel. It's called Dead Meat, and the Dead Meat is actually run by a guy named James S. Janice, and he does a kill count. He takes some of our favorite horror movies, and he actually runs through it. He actually will count all of the kills and give you a breakdown. He tells you how many females, how many males, uh, different ways they're killed. He actually starts talking about the best kills versus the worst kills of the
Nice.
movie, and he also gives a lot of a lot of the behind the scenes things, some of the basic trivia about the movie, about the producers, about things that happened in there, and it's very interesting.
Right.
I borrowed a little bit of his content, a little bit of some factual information that I pulled from there, and watching that, and which I kind of added in here, giving credit to him, of course. But I highly recommend it. If you've never seen it, I think you will be in store for a treat.
Yeah, man. So it turns out that the kill count of Evil Dead Rise is 12. Now, when Thomas floated this idea, I tried to mentally count, and I came up with 8. So I guess there was a couple more red shirts in there that I didn't remember for that in the hallway scene. I'm guessing I missed those guys or something. But just to put it into context, Like this is, I think I saw that Army of Darkness has a kill count of 125 or something like that. So it's not. It's more impactful. They meant more. Some of them were kids. It was very emotional. This movie. So you got a grand total of 12 kills for the Deadite army in this movie.
And these are people who either or were killed or were Deadites. They could actually be someone who was already a Deadite, who became a Deadite, or somebody who was killed and became a Deadite. So that's how some of the counts are included.
That's
So
tough though, because technically Bruce Campbell became a Deadite and he's still not dead canonically. So I don't know.
yes.
I don't know. I don't know if I buy that logic, but we'll go with 12 for now. All right. So there's just, we had one more section here we wanted to talk about a little bit is we last episode on our inaugural episode we talked about some collectibles associated with the film, and we're going to do that
Yes.
here too. So I was racking my brain and I'm like, were there any tie-in merchandise for this movie? I can't think of anything. I scoured the internet, and like the main thing I could come up with, Thomas, was this vinyl soundtrack, which it has some very cool like key art here with like the eyeball
yeah.
close up and the fly right on the eyeball. And like, I mean, look at the printed, you got color printed discs, like records, like that's, I mean, there's some nice stuff. You have the outline of the elevator cable scene on one of the
Wow.
inserts there.
And
I mean,
I'm sure
that's good
that
stuff.
I'm sure they include the incantation. So of course we have to have that to bring some of the Deadites back to life.
That's true. It looks like you got at least one page of the Necronomicon there. And, that takes me back to like, there was some really cool DVD releases of the first 3 films that came in replica Necronomicons that had like recreations of some of the pages that you can see in the movie. They just don't do home video releases like they used to, man.
Right.
Like the problem is they made it with like, it was sort of like, it was a mushy, like, Necronomicon with a zombie face on it, right? So like, that soft rubber, man, it just doesn't hold up over time. That's it's something those Hot Toys collectors will warn you about on the joints, man.
That is why you have to use human flesh.
You got to use the real human.
You've got to
use real leather.
Exactly. If it's not human flesh, it's not going to stand up.
Yeah, exactly. So, so this is all I could really find for this movie, but I wanted to cover a little bit about some of the stuff that's generally available franchise wide. Here's a little bit of an older piece I've seen around, and this is a replica of the Kandarian dagger from the second movie. And this thing is like, it's a dagger that sort of purifies somebody, and like if they get stabbed with this in the movie, I'm pretty sure it actually kills them, even if they're a Deadite. And I've seen one of these in person at a local shop here that does a lot of physical media, and it was really impressive and looked just as good as the one in the movie, because the one in the movie, was made by like some weekend warriors. It's not a high budget movie, so like it looked perfect. It looked perfect. This is from Trick or Treat Studios back in 2013, and they do a lot of like full-size replica stuff that's not gonna break the bank. Like they have like a like a Chucky replica doll that's full size, that's like, it's a couple $100, I think. I don't think it's crazy. So like their stuff's known to be a little on the cheaper end, but the detail on this particular piece really held up, and I thought it turned out really good. But there's that, and then the one other thing I wanted to show was for the statue collectors in the CW audience, Prime One a few years ago did have this Ash Williams from Evil Dead 2.
That's impressive. That's a good looking statue.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. It came with a couple different head sculpts. You got the crazy taxidermy deer that sort of screams and laughs at him on the wall. For me, this is like, I don't know if I'm sold on that head sculpt per se, but it came with a couple different ones. But for me, it's like the window dressing here. Like this is a massive base. You have a big chunk of the wall there. You got Henrietta climbing out of the crawl space, and the Book of the Dead in front.
Now, tell me this: was it Evil Dead or Evil Dead 2 where didn't they call her the pit bitch or something like that? No, that was Army of Darkness.
That's Army of Darkness. Yeah.
What do they call Henrietta? Now, Evil Dead 2, that's the one where she came out of out of the basement, start levitating in the air and spinning
Yeah,
around.
exactly.
Okay,
Played
there you
by
go. That's right.
played gloriously by Sam Raimi's
By
brother
Sammy's
Ted
brother,
Raimi.
right?
Yeah, and he plays this older lady who's a zombie, and her clothes aren't really holding up. It's quite a sight. But basically, that's Professor Nobi's wife, and he didn't have it in him to dismember her, and that's why she's still around by the time
Yes.
Ash gets to the cabin. But this is a beautiful piece that covers a lot of the key moments in the movie. And to be honest, if you've never seen Evil Dead 2, the scene where all the furniture and the taxidermy starts laughing at him is that's peak cinema there, man. Like
Everything.
like
The lamp is laughing.
the camera work. It's
Everything's laughing. At
yeah,
him.
it's amazing. You can't. It's hard to imagine they did it all as sort of puppets, and it's some fine work. You should really check it out. It's good stuff.
And what's great is that we don't expect the special effects to be, for a low budget movie. We don't expect to see the effects from the 80s to be the way they are now. That's the thing that makes that movie so charming. Now, of course, that's also the thing that made me think it was a horror comedy. But it's because
Yeah,
it just the laughing heads and the the green blood and stuff like that. It kind of made it feel like, okay, oh, I don't have to be scared by this. I can laugh at it because this is actually kind of funny.
yeah,
But the modern day movies, I think that's the unfortunate thing, is that while I did appreciate the fact that it's a horror movie, um, and being that I'm much older than I was when I was a child, I know that this is something which was made up by people to be shown on film, so I don't have to be afraid.
well,
This movie would have freaked me out if I was a child, if I was a kid and saw that.
yeah, that's fair enough. And Professor Chaos in the chat here is trying to freak us out for real. He's telling us the Necronomicon's real. He says you used to be able to visit it in a museum. I vaguely recall hearing that, like, the story about it being made with human skin is based on like some Nazi thing. I once read something about that, but like I don't know, man. I don't know what this guy's talking about. I don't think it's a Kandarian Book of the Dead, but one day all the real info about it and the theories disappeared online. Oh yeah, okay. He's trying to scare us, Thomas. That's what's going on here.
Yes, you absolutely are. Okay.
All right, so on last episode, on our first episode, we sort of developed our rating scale for movies, and that's that we're rating this movie a certain number of 5 men of culture. so
Yes.
so this is our emoji that's representative of Classy Thomas's fine aesthetic and channel rebrand. Here's what we're gonna give these movies.
I am
Here's our
going to give
ratings
mine
here.
4. Exactly. Yes.
Nice.
I'm feeling a nice 4. I wanted to give it a 4.5, but we're not doing halves. But
Not
that's
yet.
okay. I kind of I think it to me I think because I like the way they developed the characters and I enjoyed the special effects, and I'm also giving a little bit of props for the fan service. I enjoyed seeing the Easter eggs that reminded me of the other movies. So of course, the one thing is that if you've never seen any of the previous movies, you may not appreciate it in the same way that I could appreciate it. But I really like that. I like being able to call back those memories of those other movies. So that's why I kind of gave it a nice solid for it. It's not a perfect movie to me, but it's a very strong movie.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, I would I don't know, man. I wish I could re-encapsulate the childlike wonder that Thomas has, about a modern film. This, like I think we said last time, this is going to be the most modern film that we cover in this series. Most likely it's from last year, and for me it's fun, it's all right, it's okay, but it pales in comparison to the rest of the series. I even like the remake better, to be honest, but that's but we're talking about, I would still rather watch a horror movie like this than like 90% of the stuff that I would rather watch this than an MCU movie any day of the week. That's me, Thomas. But like,
Yeah.
but still, I'll give it a solid. It's got a 3 out of 5. It's worth it if you like this franchise, but I would
Right.
put it at the bottom.
And actually, the I think that originally they were planning on putting this out on streaming service because it was kind of during COVID, but they I think test audiences kind of gave them the notion, okay, I think we need to give this a theatrical release. So they did put it out there. And actually this movie is the highest grossing of the entire movie franchise.
Yeah, I could believe that. Basically, it has the highest budget feel, and like
Mhm.
although it's sort of an urban environment, they're sort of stuck in an apartment the whole time.
Yeah, so you kind of have that claustrophobic feel of a cabin because
Yeah,
you can't get out, as opposed to and but you're in an urban center because urban centers are supposed to be places where people can feel free, and yet here you are trapped.
yeah.
And so I kind of appreciated that.
Yeah, I think I don't know. It was nice to change it up, and they give you that little taste of the cabin horror at the beginning. But
Hmm.
yeah, man, I don't know. It's for me. It's for me. What it really did was it made me want to go back and revisit the rest of the series, and I'll probably start with the remake because I think I've only seen that once. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I've
man,
only seen it once.
we're coming down to the end of the show here. So I'm gonna go ahead and read the list of our lovely Patreonies here. So we got Captain Fordo, Ian Seaby, Renee Mendez, Eric Mariscal, Quinn Aguirre, King Louie, Mark Pearson, Paul Schreiber, Equan, Chris Valencerina, Ben Thomas, David Jones, Sam Gist, Daminator, Joao Bretta, Thomas Clark. There he is right there.
That's
And
me.
Eric Schweitzer, Six Guns Figs, Badfish, Toy Cartel, Dan Lee, Deanie Martin, Stephen Kret, Big Fern, Caesar Mariquin, Mark Phillips, Lisa Martin Bomonsky, Rick De Gregorio, Ricardo Valdez, Jose CZ, Erwin Azucena, The Illustrious Rainer, Alid Morgan, Tukathri, Wah, Derek Bysiadinsky. I got you wrong 2 times, buddy. I got to clarify that one. Sorry about that, but we appreciate your support. Aries Portillo, Alvin J, Six Scale Collector, Aurelius Delgado, Jazz Carroll, Joe Ridley, Pablo Meza, D Rock, Matt Clevenger, Seth Tucker, CC3PO, Scott Smith, Dom Matan, Stephen Percha, Sean Utsi, Scott
You see?
Bradley,
Okay.
Steve and Maria Stanley, Eddie Manzanares, Louis Bennett, Chip Perrin, Jimmy Hernandez, Gigi the Judgmental,
GG.
XODS, and Brenton Palmer. So we really appreciate you guys so much, and we're gonna cover a little bit about what the what it takes to be a patron here, and the hot seat just gets you access to some of the digital benefits. But where things really start to get interesting is the Sweet Angel tier. That's where you start
Mhm.
getting some awesome stickers sent out to you, and there's some additional perks to the higher tiers. I think at the What a Guy tier, the big one there, you get an exclusive Pog set, but they might be on like their last 1 or 2 examples of that by now if they haven't run out yet. But if you did join on that tier, you'd be probably getting a new Pog set. I don't want to make any promises for the guys, but I hear if that runs out, they're going to make a new Pog set. But those Patreon benefits stickers for the if you're on the second tier higher for this month are these 2 stickers, and you got the Tough Nut sticker and the Small Talk logo sticker there in a wrestling format. Now, Thomas, could you go ahead and read our YouTube channel members?
Absolutely. Ah, the first one's Absolute Irwin. Okay, absolutely. Then we have Alvin J, Andrew Debo, Benjamin Hanson, Big Old Fern, Bob Dylan, CC3PO, Chris V, CT603, DJ, Daminator, Doc Smizzle, Equan, Fat Batman, Gare Beer, Good Old Spotchka, Gotham Cenobites, Justin Sports Car, Card, LV Avenger 702, Mark Pearson, Mike Latoris, Money Mendez, OG Fan, OMFG Rick, One Six-Figure Focus, Paul Schreiber, Philip the Fool, S. Beam, Sam Gist, Scarn Lord, SpongeBob Square Balls, that's me, Sunnyvale Rust, The Ben Thomas Show, Toy Mafia, and ExoDS.
All right. So thanks very much to all our YouTube channel members.
Yes.
And we want to just give you a quick look at the network here. Thomas, what shows we got on the CW network?
Yeah, we got a question of the week. Now, I asked actually several questions, but that's not the same as the question of the week. So you need to tune in to question of the week to find out what they're talking about. Then we got Collecting Weekly Live. That's a Tuesday show, I believe, where we have our fine four or five gentlemen who will sit there and talk about figures and all kinds of cool stuff. We've got Small Talk with, of course, my co-host Chris helps to moderate that, where they're talking about the small figures, the things other than our 6-scale figures. We have Mind Flayer's Web. Now, I don't know exactly what I think that's more like a video. Is that more like video stuff, Chris? Or
that is the guys playing Baldur's Gate 3, which is a official Dungeons and Dragons video game. And if you're into D&D, I highly recommend that one.
Okay. Then on Fridays, we have Just Another Friday Night, where we have, of course, our gentlemen are sitting there telling us, doing reviews of some of our great programs and things. We have After Dark on Wednesday nights, where the Ox Father brings on some of his friends, and we sit there and talk about our dreams, our goals, our woes, and we just put it out there late at night.
That's putting it nicely. It gets offside real quick. After Dark's one of my favorite shows.
Sometimes it gets a little frisky, but it's kind of cool. And then, of course, we have CW Movie Night, which you're watching right now. This actually alternates between Small Talk every other week. So we're on this week. Next week, you're going to find Small Talk. And that's actually, instead of at 9 p.m., you guys are start at what time, Chris?
I think it's just 9:30 Eastern.
Oh, is it 9:30?
Pretty close. Yeah. So 8:30 Central, and yeah, man. And then you, of course, check out Just Another Friday Night tomorrow night, and they cover a real wide breadth of topics from entertainment to collectibles. They are a great show. You should check that out as well.
Absolutely.
And yeah, man, that was our chat about Evil Dead Rise, and now it's. Now the ball's back in my court, and I'm gonna and Thomas is learning with the audience for the first time what our next movie is gonna be. So he's gonna have to.
Chris? Come on, tell me.
He's gonna have to figure out how to watch it. I think it's on Tubi, so you should be safe. But our next movie is gonna be Fire and Ice, which is a 80s animated classic that is heavily influenced by Frank Frazetta's hands-on work. So
this Frazetta.
Yeah, this is just a wild animated fantasy movie with tons of rotoscope action, and it's got some new collectibles and comics that are dropping as we speak, which is kind of weird. After they took a 40-year break, now they're making new stuff for it. So it's a good time.
Is Fire and Ice in the same vein as Heavy Metal?
It's like that's probably your next closest comparison, but this is like the Heavy Metal. If you take like the best sequence from the Heavy Metal movie and apply steroids, that's what Fire and Ice is. Yeah. So
I'm gonna look forward to checking this out.
Yeah, so that was we're gonna talk about that on our next episode, but next Thursday you're gonna have Small Talk, and we'll be back after that. But I had a great time talking about Evil Dead. It's gonna make me watch the remakes, and I'm looking forward to Force and Thomas.
I gotta ask you.
Yeah.
After hearing my glorious commentary over this, did it give you any further appreciation of the movie that you might not have had before?
It's good for having come out last year, Thomas. That's the best I can do. Like, there's nothing else I would like. There's nothing else I would like to watch from last year. Nothing. So It's got that.
All right, well,
guys.
I'll take that.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us, guys. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.